Blade here with another Chinese fantasy novel FAQ. So if you saw the title, you know what the video is about. And I have to admit, it's a little bit of a clickbait title, not too much though. This is actually part one of a two-part series that I'm making. The first one's called Why Wuxia is Better Than Xianxia. The second video is going to be called Why Xianxia is Better Than Wuxia. So I'm not actually saying that one is better than the other. What I am going to be doing is I'm going to be talking about some of the advantages or maybe superiorities that one of the different genres has compared to the other. If you are not familiar with the difference between wuxia and xianxia, please check out the other video I made a while back where I talk about all the differences. So let's get started. Number 5 reason why wuxia is better than xianxia is that a lot of times, not all the time, but many times, wuxia has historical elements. So sometimes the stories take place in ancient China. They might take place in a specific dynasty. Some of them might even feature characters that are real life people from history. So because of that, you can actually learn a lot about the history of China by reading these novels. Now, again, take that with a grain of salt. You can't just read the novels and then learn about Chinese history because they're historical fiction. They're not 100% accurate. But take one example, the Deer in the Cauldron, which I read in English, not in Chinese. It has a lot of historical elements. It takes place in a real time period in Chinese history. The Emperor of China is one of the characters. There are other characters from Chinese history that appear. And granted, everything that happens is not real, but it was so interesting to me that it prompted me to go and do research into those things. And actually, early on, a lot of my basic understanding of the timeline of Chinese history and some basic elements came because of reading those novels. So that's definitely a big upside to wuxia. Number 4, I think that wuxia tends to have more realistic characters sometimes. They do things that real people would do. And I'm not saying that xianxia novels, the cultivation novels, I'm not saying that the characters are unrealistic. It's just that because of the high element of fantasy and the hyperbolic exaggeration of humanity and of emotions and of magic and all the stuff that tends to happen in those novels, I feel like the characters a lot of times are less realistic than wuxia. So everybody in the online community kind of jokes about the characters in Chinese web novels and how exaggerated they are and how, like, you know, you have the murder hobos and the psychopaths and doing all these crazy, ridiculous things. That's more likely to happen in xianxia, whereas in wuxia, it's definitely a lot more down to earth. I feel like a lot of times the characters are more relatable just because they're more human in some ways. In the cultivation novels, the characters become gods and they can, create planets and galaxies and universes and stuff. And at a certain point, there's a kind of disconnect from reality there. So that's reason number 4 is the realistic characters. Reason number 3 why wuxia is better than xianxia is it's a lot easier to make wuxia novels and stories into television shows and movies. It's probably equally easy when it comes to comic books and games. But in terms of the TV shows and movies, because wuxia is grounded in a little bit more reality, it doesn't have to rely on a lot of crazy CGI. It's a lot easier to make them into TV shows and movies. Sometimes they could even be made without any CGI at all, or at least with very little amount of CGI. xianxia, on the other hand, it's fantastic Taoist magic and planets and exploding things and dragons and all kinds of stuff. You pretty much cannot make that type of stuff without CGI. And of course, CGI is very easy to botch up. And it's very easy to take something that should be really, really cool and impressive and dramatic and awesome and have it become something really cheesy and kind of laughable. And there are so many really awesome xianxia novels that would be virtually impossible to turn into a real life TV show and movie. I'm not saying that TV shows and movies are anything and everything or everything and anything, but it is really cool sometimes to see your favorite story come to life with real live actors and stuff. That's just very unlikely to happen with xianxia, but with wuxia, it's definitely possible. There are a ton of television shows out there. In fact, just about every major wuxia novel, and I'm talking about the classics, have been made into TV shows and movies. And nowadays, more and more of the web novel stuff, that's happening on that side as well. But we've seen the result with a lot of the xianxia stories being made into real life stuff. It just tends to not work out as well. Number 2 reason why wuxia novels are better than xianxia novels is that the stuff that you see in wuxia novels, you can actually see in real life. What I mean is there is really a Shaolin temple. Shaolin comes up in wuxia novels a lot. There really is a Wudang temple. There really is Kung Fu. There really are swords. All of that stuff that you read about in those novels, it comes from real life. It's heavily inspired by real life. And so you can see them. You can travel to China and you can go to the temples, the same kind of temples that you read about in the novels. You can go to the park in China and you can see people practicing their martial arts. You can see them doing Tai Chi. You can see the fans. You can see all of that stuff. It's all based on reality and you can see it. And that makes wuxia really, really cool. When you've read a handful of wuxia novels and you've read about the Forbidden City, you've read about the Great Wall, you've read about the West Lake, you've read about the Yangtze River and stuff, you can go to China and you can see all those things and it's so cool. And for any of you who are into wuxia, and again, I'm specifically talking about wuxia, if you have read a lot of those novels and have not taken the time to take a trip to China, I highly recommend you do it. I highly recommend that you buy some wuxia novels or even print them out or put them on your Kindle or your mobile device so that you can read them while you're in China. And it's just really, really a cool experience. Unfortunately, the stuff that comes up in xianxia is usually all fictional. Sometimes there are elements that are taken from Chinese history, but they're kind of just used in name only. Some of the look and the feel is the same. The mountains, the temples and different things like that, they do carry over into xianxia, but there's just so much more stuff from wuxia. I'll never forget, back when I lived in China, I could just go to the local park and there would be people doing martial arts performances with swords and spears and, giant staffs and like all kinds of stuff. Little kids, like 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, swinging swords around, old guys with, it looks like the profound Kung Fu master kind of guys. All that stuff is just there for you to see with your own eyes. So very, very cool. And that kind of pertains to the number one reason why I think that wuxia is better than xianxia. And that is that it could happen in real life. What I mean is, when you read the stories about these people who existed in ancient China and they lived above the law, or they kind of had their own underworld that they lived in, they weren't accountable to authority, they were like their own society. It almost seems like that stuff could be real, and that adds a really awesome element to the story. I think it's similar in the Western world, for example, with like Robin Hood. There's something about Robin Hood that's so cool because it's a quasi-historical figure, and there really is a thing in real life called archery where people can get really good with bows and arrows, and it took place in England, and you can go to some of those places, kind of like how I mentioned with the number 2 reason for wuxia. And so because wuxia is something that could happen, I think it adds a really very profound element to it. Back when I first got into it, I just couldn't help but close my eyes and think, wow, what if these things were real? What if there really were guys in ancient China who could develop their chi and they could like fly through the air and they could do these really amazing feats of martial arts and swordsmanship. It's just such a cool thing. It's similar to kind of like spaghetti westerns with the gunfighters. Even though the way that gunfighters are depicted in westerns is pretty much not real, it still kind of feels like it could be real. And so there's a really romantic and exciting element to that. Of course, with xianxia, it's like, unless you have a very like gullible imagination, you know that those kind of things aren't real. They aren't happening. There were no dragons flying around in ancient China and phoenixes and all that stuff. And as much as we would like it to be, it's similar to Star Wars in the sense that it's very romantic and dramatic in an unrealistic way. You have to have suspension of disbelief in order to kind of get into the universe because it's not real. Wuxia is different. It could be real. So those are my top 5 reasons why I think wuxia is better than xianxia. Don't worry, all of you who are fans of xianxia cultivation novels. I'm going to be coming up with another video probably next week where I talk about why xianxia is actually better than wuxia. However, before that video comes out, we're talking about the upsides to wuxia and why in some ways it's better than xianxia. What are your thoughts? Is there something that I didn't add to the list that you think is important? Do you disagree with me? Do you think that despite everything I've said, xianxia is still better? Keep the discussion going in the comments below. Again, I'm not having any direct support for this channel. So if you like the content and you like the videos, please like and subscribe and share with people that you think would like it. In news for myself, incidentally, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of news at the end of the videos for those of you who follow my videos on a regular basis. That way I can keep the content up front and then news at the back. For those who don't care about the news, you can just see you later. Okay, so the news is A lot of stuff. I'm having a website built for myself to go along with the launch of my novel, Legends of Ogregate. I talked about Legends of Ogregate on Twitter a while back, and the proofs came in. I had to make some tweaks and changes. So as of the release of this video, I'm going to say it's probably still a few days out. I think by the time this video is released, I'm recording it now, but it needs to get edited and whatnot, again, by Madam Deathblade. Thank you. Anyway, by the time it gets released, I should have announced the pre-sale on Amazon, where you can get you can buy the ebook, and then it will be directly sent to your Kindle as soon as it's officially released. It's going to be on paperback and it's going to be on Kindle. It will be on Kindle Unlimited. For those of you who aren't familiar with the novel, it is a wuxia xianxia novel. Starts out heavily in the wuxia realm and ends kind of heading toward the xianxia level. I will do a video kind of talking about the story and everything, but that will be probably in a couple weeks, I would say. So those are the big news items for now. Thanks for watching. My next video will be hopefully next week, where I talk about why xianxia is better than wuxia. Until then, God's love.